The day was a Saturday, just a normal day like any other. My family had gone to a local state park for a weekend of camping. It was a normal camping trip like any of the many others we had taken as a family. My brother, Mark, and I had gotten up early on this particular day and decided that we were going to go do a little exploring in the woods. I was about the age of 13, and my brother was 15. We figured we were big enough that we could do the exploring without having much trouble, and we also knew our way around the woods here, as we had camped here many times before. The exploring started off like every other time that we had gone before. Mark was leading, I was bringing up the rear. We really didn't have a specific destination, just to walk for a while, then go back in order to make it back for breakfast. We walked and talked, joked, and played around for about an hour when we came upon an area that was quieter than the rest of the woods we had been walking. You don't pay much attention to it, but having grown up outside in the woods around our house, it just caught my attention. The woods have their own sounds, and when things go quiet, it is just one of those things that catch your attention. I try not to pay much attention to it, but it was still there in the back of my mind. Mark didn't seem to catch on that things got quiet. But what could I expect? He was the one that was into sports and things at school, and I was always more the guy that was the loner and did a lot on my own. Well, we walked for a little while until I almost ran into the back of Mark, who had suddenly stopped right in the middle of the path. When I looked up at him, I could see that he was looking off to the side of the path at a small little clearing. Now, we had been here many times before on previous trips, and never did I remember anything about the clearing that was now there. In the middle of the small clearing, yes, actually stairs. No, it didn't go to a home. And, there was not even an old foundation where a house would have at one time stood. It was simply a set of stairs. We both just stood there and looked at the stairs. Mark didn't say anything at first. I think he was as surprised as I was, and neither of us knew what to think. He looked back at me and asked, "Do you see what I see?" "Yeah, you do." I replied, just as stunned as he was. "Have he's always been there, or am I seeing things?" He asked, with a face that I could tell meant his brain was still trying to download the information and process it. "No, you're not seeing things. I see them too, and I sure don't remember them here," was the only response I could give. "Where do they go?" "There's no house here," Mark said, more as a statement than anything else. "I don't think there ever was a house here. If you look, there's no sign of ever having a foundation." I was all my mind could come up with my own way of trying to make sense of it. Mark reluctantly stepped off the path and walked towards the stairs. "What are you doing?" I asked him as I watched him walk over towards the stairs. "We have to go check this out," he said, as he looked at me like I was a chicken to go over to the steps. "I don't know. Should we really go check them out, or will we get in trouble?" I asked, because I was nervous about approaching them. "Oh, come on. How are we going to get in trouble checking out some stairs that are in the middle of nowhere?" was his reply as he made that face like I was a chicken. So, of course, me not wanting to look like the big chicken of us two, I followed him off the trail, and we headed towards the stairs. Now, something in the back of my mind kept telling me that something was not right, and we should not go over there. But at the same time, I could not be the weak one, so like an idiot, I followed him. Now, I guess this is where I should explain that those stairs we found were not just like the stairs that everyone has that lead up to the deck in the backyard. No, these stairs were more like the ones that you would see in an old Victorian-style home. They were huge, and the big posts in the bottom of the rails and at the top were made up all fancy, like they had animals or like gargoyles carved into them. And the spindles looked like straight sticks that had snakes carved into them to look like the snakes were slithering their way up to the top. We walked over to the stairs and stood there at the bottom looking up to the top, and Mark was running his hand along the head of the gargoyle on the post at the bottom of the stairs. "What are you doing?" I asked as I half gasped at him, even touching the thing. "This is really cool," he said, as he kept on running his hand on the gargoyle. "I don't know that you should be touching that thing. I don't get a good feeling about this thing," I replied, as there was not way that I was going to touch the thing. Mark stood there for a minute, just checking out the post. Then he stopped rubbing it and looked up to the top of the stairs. "What?" I asked as I could see that he was looking up to the stairs like he was actually looking at something. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "I don't hear anything," I replied, as I strained to hear something, anything. "There," he said, as he raised his hand and pointed up to the top of the stairs. "No, wait, I hear something." "What is that?" I asked, as I could hear what sounded like whispering. It was very faint, and I could not make out what was being said, just that I could tell that something was being said. What are they saying? Mark asked. Don't you mean who is saying that? As said as I thought that was the more appropriate question. There, it is getting louder, Mark said, as he made the face like he was really trying to concentrate and make out what was being said. Yeah, I hear it. Maybe we need to get out of here, I said, as I was getting nervous and really was kind of over the whole thing. It was really making me unsettled. As we stood there, looking at the stairs, the voices seemed to be getting louder, although we still could not understand what was being said. It sounded like a mix of male and female voices. They were slowly getting louder. I looked around to see if there was someone just messing with us, but we were there alone. There appeared to be no one else there, watching or doing anything like they were tricking us. It made no sense to me as to why these stairs were here. Hey, I heard about people finding stairs in the woods. They say to stay away from them, was the statement coming out of Mark's mouth as he stepped up onto the first stair. So, then why are you standing on the stair? I asked as I was thinking if you heard about this yet you still going to test this. Because what is wrong? They're just stairs, and nothing is happening, see? He said as he stepped up to the second step. No, we need to be going, I said as I stepped back and tried to convince him to get off the stairs. Come on, let's go to the top, he said as he tried to get me to join him on the stairs. No way. I'm not going up there, I said as I looked at him like he was completely out of his mind. As he stepped up another stair, the sounds of the voices began to get louder, and as he reached the fourth step up, the air around the stairs seemed to begin to change a little. It started to change in a way that it felt like it was getting warmer, and I could see what appeared to be a shimmer to it. I mean, like when you look down a country road in the summertime, and you see the shimmer coming up off the road. Yeah, that is what it looked like in the air all around the stairs. I tried to talk him down, but for some reason he was just taken in by the stairs. As he stepped up a few more steps, the voices got louder, and I could start to make out what was being said. At the same time, the shimmer around the stairs got bigger and growing. Come on, Mark, we need to go. I yelled to him, but he was just not hearing me. Oh, don't be stupid, come on. He yelled back at me as he waved his hand like he was wanting me to follow him to the top. No, I'm not going up there, and if you don't come on, I'm going to go tell Dad and have him deal with you, I said as I was trying to threaten him so he would get off the stairs. But no matter what I said, it was going in one ear out the other. He was just not listening to me. It was as if he was being drawn up the stairs by someone or something that I could not see. He was ignoring me and seemed to be determined to reach the top no matter what I could say. Come on, see, there is nothing here, it is just stairs, was all he would say as he continued to walk up to the top of the stairs. I could also see that it was getting darker around us. I mean, it's morning time, and the sun is up and bright, and yet here in the clearing where we were at, it was as if something was blocking some of the sunlight. There were no clouds in the sky, and no trees that were covering the clearing, so it should be nice and bright. Yet, it appeared to be darkening slightly. Mark, come on, we need to go. I yelled up to him, but no way was I going to go up those stairs. Come on, come see what I see, Mark replied, as he pointed to the end of the small landing that was at the top of those stairs. I looked, but I could see nothing outside of the shimmer that was taking shape at the end of that landing. It was a shimmer that seemed to be shimmering in the shape of a doorway. Come on, Mark, get down, we need to go. I yelled up to him, but he kept on going, not even looking back at me. Come on up, come check this out, they want you to come with me, Mark said, as he stepped onto the landing and started walking towards the shimmering at the end. No, Mark, come on, I yelled again as I took another step back toward the path. Well, at least where I thought the path was at. Mark walked to the end of the landing and looked back down at me. This is great, he said, as if he had really discovered something great and wanted to share it with me. But there was no way I was going to go up there. No, come on, I'm going back to the camp, is what I told him as I turned to go back to the path. But as I turned and began to walk back, I looked, and where the path was is now not there. I cannot see a path. The entire clearing seemed to be surrounded by bushes with no path through them. It was as if the entire clearing was now boxed in by bushes with no exit. I looked back up towards Mark. He was just staring forward into that shimmer that was now brighter, and it was as if there was a light blue color shimmering inside of it. I watched him lift up his hand and reach out towards the middle of the light and shimmer. Dave, come on. You should see this. They want you to come up here too, Mark said, as he did not even look back at me. He just kept staring into the light. Hell no, I am not coming up there. I yelled back up to him as I stood there and watched the shimmer swirling in the air like it was spinning in a circle, and the light within it was getting brighter and brighter. I could also hear the voices, men and women. They were talking, and what they were saying was, come on, come inside. You're almost home. Come on inside. I cannot see anyone other than me and Mark. But it was a woman's voice, and I knew there were no other people around us. I stood there and watched Mark reach his hand out and stick it inside the shimmer. When he did that, the light shone really bright, and the shimmer seemed to really concentrate around his hand. At that point, I can't say if Mark stuck his hand in further or if his hand was pulled into the light, but his arm went deeper and deeper into the shimmer. As the shimmer seemed to consume his arm, he looked back down at me and said, "Come on, it's wonderful." I could not say anything. I just stood there and looked as he seemed to get pulled into the light and shimmer further and further, until finally he had stepped all the way into the shimmer. When all of his was in the light, and the last thing I saw was his foot as it disappeared. Dave, help me," Mark yelled, as I looked up and saw a hand reach out of the shimmer, then get pulled back inside. Once he had disappeared, the shimmer began to shrink smaller and smaller, as the shimmer began to simmer, and as the shimmer shrank, the darkness began to lighten. The smaller the shimmer became, the brighter it became, and the voices sounded like they were getting further and further away. When the shimmer disappeared and the voices stopped, I turned to look for the path, and there it was, right where it had been before we stepped off of it. I quickly ran back to the path and turned to yell for Mark again. But when I looked back to the clearing, it was now gone. I mean gone as there was no stairs and there was no clearing. It was there as I was just standing there in it, but now it was as if it was never there. I stood there for a moment, just trying to figure out what happened. Mark, I yelled out for him several times. I could hear nothing, not even the sounds of the woods. Then, just as I began to turn and run back to tell my parents what happened, I thought for a moment I could hear Mark yell out my name once. But as I hesitated for a moment, the sounds of the woods returned, and it was as if nothing ever happened. I took off running back down the path back to the campground to tell my parents what had just happened. I ran so fast that I think it may have only taken a few seconds to get back. When I came running back, I saw my mom standing at the picnic table setting out plates and things, and at the grill I could see my dad standing there, cooking breakfast. "Mom, Dad," I yelled as I ran back to them, panting like I had just ran the Boston Marathon. "What are you doing? Where is your brother? It is time for breakfast," my mom said, as she saw me run up to the picnic table panting, pointing back towards the woods. "He went up the stairs, and now he is gone," I said, through the breaths I was trying to take. "What do you mean he is gone, and what stairs are you talking about?" my dad asked, as he put his spatula down and looked at me as if I was completely out of my mind. "We went for a walk in the woods, and we saw stairs. I told him not to go up there, but he did anyways, and something pulled him in." I tried to explain. "Stairs, what are you talking about? Slow down, and tell me what you're talking about," Dad said, as he walked over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Like I said, went for a walk, then there was a clearing with a set of stairs. We walked to them, then Mark walked up them. I told him not to go up there, but he did it anyways. I tried to explain just what happened. They both stood there looking at me like I had completely gone nuts. "Why would there be stairs out in the middle of the woods?" Dad replied, as he turned and walked towards the woods, yelling out for Mark. "Mom, I'm telling you the truth. We were walking, then there was stairs. Then as Mark walked up them, we could hear voices. They were saying for me to come with him, but I knew not to go up there. I tried to tell him not to go up there, but he was just not listening. Go, show your dad where you guys were at. Mark is probably just playing with you. Go show your father where you were at," Mom said, as she still did not believe me, and motioned for me to go with Dad and show him what I was talking about. "Show me," Dad said simply, as he motioned for me to show me where we had gone to. I ran over to my dad, and we walked back down the path so that I could take him to where Mark and I had been when we found the stairs. As we walked to the area in the woods where we had found those stairs, I kept trying to explain what had happened, trying to recall all the details that I could remember. When we got to the place where I thought the clearing had opened up, it still was not there, but I knew that I was in the right place. I could see my footprints in the dirt on the ground where we had stepped off the path and the tracks where I had gotten back onto the path. See the tracks right there, I said as I pointed down to the tracks in the path. My dad looked down and I saw the tracks. Are you sure this is the spot? He asked, and he stood there looking around for a clearing. Yes, this is the place, I replied, as I wanted him to believe me. Well, I don't see no clearing, and I don't see any staircase. Dad replied, that is what I told you, it was here, and then it wasn't. I said, very excitedly, and upset that I just knew that no one would believe what I was saying. Come on, he said, as he called out Mark's name a few times, and as we headed back to the campsite. We walked back to the campsite, and as we walked back out of the woods, and my mom came back into sight. Did you find him? Mom yelled out to my dad as we walked back towards her. No, nothing. Did he come back? Dad asked. No. What did you find back in there? She asked. Nothing. I saw where the tracks went off the trail and back onto the trail, but there was no stairs and no clearing. He replied as they were trying to figure out what to do. So all of us started yelling out Mark's name, but there was no reply. We stood there looking into the woods hoping that he was playing a joke and would just come walking out of the woods and join us, but nothing. Nothing came out of the woods. Well, we need to call the police and report this so that we can get some help in here to find him, Dad replied, as he pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911. He reported it to the police, and while we waited for the police to arrive, we all talked about what happened again so that my parents could try to understand what was happening. You two walked into the woods and found a clearing that no longer is there, and saw a staircase that is no longer there. Dad asked. Right, I told him not to go up there, but he did anyways. He would not listen to me. Then something happened, and he walked or was pulled into a light and disappeared. I tried again to explain. While they were trying to accept what I was telling them, the first patrol car pulled in, followed by a second. The officers got out of their cars and walked over to us and spoke with my parents. Then we had to go through the whole thing again about what happened. I stood there explaining it, and I could see that the officers were having a hard time believing me and what I was saying. Tell me again what happened. I don't think I quite understand. The first officer asked as he was taking notes and trying to figure out if I was telling him the truth or making up some story. He then asked my parents a whole slew of questions. Then they got on their phones, made a few calls. They then walked back over to where me and my dad were sitting at the picnic table, and he asked, "Can you take me to the place where this happened?" "Yes, sure," I said as my dad and I stood up and began to take the officers to the spot in the woods where the clearing had been. We got there, and again I explained what happened. The officer bent down and reached out and touched one of the shoe steps on the path. He stood up and looked around, and then turned to us and said, "Well, there is nothing here now, but we have a K9 on the way. We will see if it can pick up a scent any place." We stood there, and he asked me more about what happened as we stood there and waited for the dog to get there. After a short time, I could the dog barking, and eventually I saw the officer with the dog appear on the path walking down to us. "Where's the last place that they had entered the woods?" The officer asked. "Right here," the first officer said as he pointed down to the footprints in the dirt. "All right," the K9 officer responded as he led the dog into the brush to try and pick up any sign of Mark. The dog walked around the bush, smelling the ground. They got to the place where I told them that the clearing had been. The dog barked a little bit, then just walked in circles. It was as if the tracks were there, but then they stopped there and went no further. He ran the dog around the area for a while, then finally said, "He picks up the scent right here in this area, but the scent does not seem to go anywhere." He looked around a little more, then walked the dog down the path a short distance, but the dog did not alert on anything else. "Well, I don't know where to go from here. He is just not picking up scent from any other area," he said, as I could tell that he was frustrated for not finding scent trail any other place. "Let's go back to the campsite and wait for the others to get here," the first officer said as he gestured for all of us to go back to the campsite. When we got back up there, I could see that more people had arrived and were sitting and standing around the picnic table near my mom. "Did you find him?" Mom asked as she saw all of us walking back up out of Teehee Woods. "No, it was as if he was there, and then there were not tracks of him leaving the area." My dad yelled up to her. There was a lot of commotion going on around us while I walked over and sat down at the picnic table and let the adults do whatever it was they were going to do and try to find my brother. Over time, I have to explain all a few more times, but by the time I repeated it for the fourth time, there were about 12 people there with us. We are going to have a small search team sweep the area and see if we can find him. The officer told my parents. I can go, my dad said as he stood up from the bench. Well, sir, we would prefer that you and your family stay right here with the detective and wait to see. Maybe he will come walking out of the woods. The second officer said, as he and the others headed into the woods to go the area and start their search. We stayed at the campsite for the rest of the evening. My mom and dad were very anxious, not surprising, as the hours ticked away. I had sat there with them for several hours, and as the day went from morning and into evening, I then began to worry about what happened to my brother. I think it was only then that it really started to sink in that, yes, this is really happening. My brother is not playing a joke. Something really happened. We stayed there for a couple days, hoping each day that he would just walk out of the woods and say it was all a bad joke, never mind how much trouble he would be in if that was the case. No, it never came about that he walked out of those woods. As time went by, each day fewer and fewer people showed up to search. After about a week, they said that there was not much progress being made, so they were going to suspend the search, which really tore on my parents. It was very obvious that they were having a very hard time with Mark not coming home. As time went by, things seemed to really slow down, and then there came a time when everyone seemed to start thinking that he may actually not be found alive. I myself could not believe that he may be dead. I kept thinking that one day he was going to just show up at the front door. In time, I went from he was just missing or lost in the woods to actually starting to think that maybe he really is gone. Maybe he will never find his way home. I cannot go back to that campground, and I would not go back out into the woods, any woods for that fact. I just became scared of the woods. Well, maybe not scared of the woods, but scared of what I might come across if I was in the woods. My biggest fear was going into the woods and finding another staircase. I believe that would have the biggest impact on me would be to find a staircase in the woods. It is weird because I thought if I found a staircase, would I just turn and run, or would I call out my brother's name in hopes that I would get an answer or see him walking back down the stairs with a big smile on his face? The 1 or 2 times that I did go into woods, not alone by the way, I prayed to find stairs, and at the same time prayed to not find any stairs. It was the greatest paradox. Over time, things went on and settled down, and life continued. Things were never the same without Mark there, but we went on the best we could, always hoping that one day he would come home. Or whatever would happen, we could all get some conclusion. It was several years after the time that my brother had gone missing that one night we were sitting at the kitchen table, and there was a knock at the front door. My dad got up and went to answer the door. When he opened the door, there was a cop standing there. "Hello, sir. Could you step outside for a moment so I could speak to you?" My dad looked back over his shoulder towards me and Mom sitting at the table. I looked over to Mom as my dad stepped outside, shutting the door behind him, and I could see her put her head down into her hands. I know that she did that, preparing herself for the worst news. Yes, I fully expected Dad to walk back inside to tell us that Mark's body had been found and he was no longer alive, or that he had been dead for several years. We sat there in silence for the longest time, waiting for the worst news that any parent could get. Though we heard the squeak of the hinges on the front door as it swung open. I could hear the cop telling my dad, "Thank you," as I watched him walk inside, with tears falling down his face. I braced myself for him to say the worst news. But as I was grabbing the sides of my chair, and right after my dad entered, I saw Mark walk inside right behind him. My mom screamed and jumped up and ran to him and gave him a big hug. I sat there in my seat, not being able to move, just staring. It was something I can't explain. Mark was there, standing right there at the front door. Dad shut the door, and both of my parents stood there hugging him. I looked at him, and the thing that I noticed first, that he was still in the clothes that he was wearing the day he went missing. Mark was the only thing that fell out of my mouth. I stood up and walked towards him. He looked up and looked at me. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. I looked back at him, but it was as if he was looking at me, but there was something different behind those eyes. "What happened to you, man?" I asked him, as I wanted to know what really happened. He looked like he did not age a day, although he had been missing for 5 years. "I'm back. was the only thing he said. My mom and dad stood there for about 5 minutes hugging him. Then they drug him into the kitchen, the table, and Mom began to fix him a plate so that he could eat something. He had lost weight while missing. He sat down, and as Mom fixed him a plate, my dad sat back down and asked him what had happened to him. For a few moments, he just sat there and looked down at his plate. Then he looked up at Dad and said, "I don't know, I don't remember anything. The only thing that can remember is the old lady." "What old lady?" I asked. As I had been there the day, he went up those stairs and I never saw the old lady that he was talking about. "The old lady that was in the door," was his reply. He said it as though I should have seen her, but his eyes still looked like he was looking off into something that we could not see. "I never saw an old lady, and I was right there," I said, as I was now totally confused. "The lady that was in the light," was his reply again, after saying that he began to eat like he had not eaten in 5 years. After dinner, he went upstairs to his room, as Mom and Dad had kept his room just as it was the day he left it. Things settled down after that night, but that weird look in his eyes never really left. He always seemed like he could see something that no one else could see. He was himself in time, but there was always a part of him that never returned. To this day, he lives a normal life. No, he does not camp since those days, and he will not ever go into the woods. He was still my brother for all intents and purposes, but he was also at the same time really never quite the same. None of us never pushed him to tell us anything else about what happened to him during the time he was missing. So, if he did remember some things, he didn't say, and we never asked. We all just left it alone. So, one thing to learn is that if you ever find those stairs in the woods that lead to nothing or nowhere, I recommend that you don't go up those stairs. Just turn and run the other direction.